Alô. Bom,
Hello,
nós estamos aqui, Jamile e eu,
we're here, Jamili and I, to talk about the Ruth Nussenzweig Award. We would like to announce the finalists of this award. Jamili is going to talk about the award, right?
tá bom. Então, o Prêmio
So,
Ruth Nussenzweig
the Ruth Nussenzweig Award was created by a meeting in 2002
em Porto Velho.
in Porto Velho,
Aconteceu
in the meeting that we had
sob a
organized
autoridade
by Professor Mario Taba,
de
with
honra Luiz Delbrando
the
Pereira da Silva.
the president of honor, Luiz Delbrando da Silva. Luiz Delbrando, uh,
Foram alunos do Samuel Pessoa,
they were students of Samuel Pessoa. They worked together until they had to take different pathways due to the dictatorship. And Ruth and Victor, as it was said in the beginning of this event,
seguiram para Nova
they
York,
migrated to New York, where they had this extraordinary work, and Ruth was the first to show that spheroids irradiated spheroids could protect mice and then humans. In reality, she didn't do that with humans, but Clyde had the possibility to do that with humans against malaria.
fez a vida inteira de
So,
pesquisa
throughout her whole life, she did research in malaria immunology, especially for vaccines that identified the parasite target that is the only one that has produced
poderosos de
sufficiently powerful results, so to speak, that allow WHO to release the vaccine for human use, and it has been applied to phase 3 studies in Africa.
tradicionalmente a abertura
Traditionally, we have the
para essa
opening of
prêmio, que é prêmio bastante
candidacies for this award. This is a very honorable award that has honored the Brazilian young researchers like Ana Carolini and Jamile, among others. André Siqueira, who is here as well.
quem mais? Thaís.
Thais.
Thaís, então, vocês veem que é prêmio que reconhece
So you can see that this is an award that
diferenciam
recognizes people that stand out in the scientific use. We had 6 candidates and 3 were selected. Jamili is now going to announce them.
nasceu em Viena,
Ruth was born in Vienna, and she came to Brazil with 9 years old. And here she built her career. She studied at the University of São Paulo. She studied medicine, where she met Victor. She got married in the library at the University of São Paulo. And Jamili is going to invite the candidates to the stage, and it is part of the award that they introduce themselves in their work.
Oi, oi, boa noite.
Good
Então, é
evening.
uma honra poder
It is
estar
an
introduzindo
honor
aqui a
to
apresentação desses
share
candidatos junto com
the
o professor
introduction of
Cláudio,
these
com a
candidates with
coordenação
Professor
dos
Claudio. So
organizadores,
thank you very
Daniel e
much to
Carol,
the organizing committee,
quase
especially
já
Carol and
passando
Danielle.
para o
It's
próximo
almost passing the baton to
que vai ganhar esse prêmio,
the
que é o
next
Rose, que me abriu tantas
candidate that is
portas.
going to win this
Então, como o
honorable
professor
award that opened so
apresentou,
many
temos uma
doors for me.
medalha
And as Professor Claudio
junto a esse
said, we have
prêmio
a
e
medal
uma
as the
curiosidade, né, que a
award.
gente teve nos últimos, sei lá, 3
A
ou 4
brief
anos
curiosity, in the last
foram
4 years,
vencedoras mulheres
we
desse
had women
prêmio.
who won this
Então, hoje
award.
temos 3
So
candidatos
today we
e
have
3
three
nesse
male
palco.
candidates.
Então, o primeiro que eu irei
The
chamar aqui
first that
será
I
o
will invite
Dr.
here will be
Marcelo
Dr.
Augusto Mota
Marcelo
Brito,
Augusto
que
Mota Brito,
atualmente é
who
colaborador da
currently is a
Fundação de
collaborator at
Nutrição,
the
do
Foundation
Dr.
of Tropical
Heitor
Medicine,
Vieira Dourado,
Dr.
no
Heitor Vieira
Amazonas.
Dourado, in Amazonas.
Bom, boa tarde a todos e a
Good
todas.
afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcelo Brito. I'm from the Foundation of Tropical Medicine of Dr. Heitor Vieira Morado, and I am introducing myself as a candidate of to the Ruth Nussenzweig medal. I would like to thank Danielle and Carolina for the organization of this event. It was a very productive event, and I also extend my acknowledgments to the Scientific Commission for allowing me to present some of my work to you.
Eu sou farmacêutico de
I'm a
formação.
pharmacist.
Fiz o
I
mestrado e doutorado na
did my
Universidade
master's and
Federal do Amazonas
doctorate at the University of
na área de
Amazonas
medicina tropical.
and in the Foundation of Tropical Medicine in the postgraduation program, and I finished my doctorate in 2020.
O meu local de trabalho é a
My
Faculdade de Medicina Tropical Heitor
workplace
Vieira
is the
Dourado,
Foundation of
também
Tropical Medicine Heitor Vieira Dourado, a reference institution with over 50 years of studies in infectious tropical diseases. And in addition to the assistance to therapeutical development and for tropical diseases is also an important research center for the northern region of Brazil, more specifically in the Carlos Borborema Institute, where we have a very important infrastructure to do quality research. I'm from Manaus, born and raised in Manaus. Manaus is a metropolitan city, and as all metropolitan cities, it has metropolitan city problems, social, environmental, economic, which make,
tem uma população, de certa forma,
and we
particularmente
also have part of the
vulnerável
population in vulnerable conditions exposed to tropical neglected diseases.
O meu início de trabalho em ciência
The beginning of my
foi
work in
epidemiológico,
science was in the epidemiological
formação acadêmica.
institute in
O Transep
2012 after
teve
my
como objetivo
graduation.
principal a
Transepi had as the main purpose the search for investigating asymptomatic individuals in the urban area of Manaus, in the peri-urban area of Manaus.
periurbana de Manaus. Como vocês podem observar,
As you could see,
primeiro instrumento de trabalho foi
my
termômetro
first
digital.
instrument of work was a digital thermometer. The only thing that they gave me to work in the beginning of the career, everybody starts simple.
Do Transep, eles deram origem ao mestrado da doutora Anne Almeida.
Transepi originated the master's program of Dr. Ariane Almeida,
Ocorreu na área periurbana de
and
Manaus, em 3 áreas
the
bastante
survey happened in the peri-urban
problemáticas em relação
area
à
of
transmissão da
Manaus and
malária.
problematic areas regarding malaria transmission. It is an area that is surrounded by rivers with a lot of breeding sites for mosquitoes, and the population was very exposed to malaria infection.
Carga de carreadores assintomáticos em Manaus.
We had a huge number of asymptomatic patients in Manaus. 50% of the population that lived in the area had asymptomatic infection and maintained the transmission active in that region.
Conhecemos exatamente o quanto isso impactava,
So we didn't know exactly how much that
a
impacted
epidemiologia de malária
the epidemiology of
na
Manaus.
região periurbana de Manaus. Além disso, também foi visto uma grande
In addition to that, we also witnessed a big amount of infection by asymptomatic gametocytes.
da gametostemia alta também, uma
And in
grande
addition to the high
capacidade
gametocytemia, there was the capacity of these gametocytes infecting mosquitoes, even if the people had no symptoms.
Depois do estudo da Transep, eu dei início ao meu
After the Transepi study, I started my study
clínico, né, na verdade,
in clinical assays
Lacerda,
led by Marcos Lacerda. I was invited by Marcos to participate in the initial efficacy studies of tafenoquine in a single dose for the prevention of relapses of malaria. In the study, I started learning clinical research. I was coordinator of the clinical pharmacy, so I assigned medication and I did the testing of all of them to guarantee the safety of their treatment. The study had as the main result showing that tafenoquine in single dose is comparable to primaquine under supervision in 14 days for the prevention of relapse in comparison to the chloroquine used with placebo. That was the initial study that gave the first information about the efficacy of tefenoquine in individuals truly infected with malaria. My master's consisted of the validation of diagnostic tests, which is an area that I work to this day. We did the clinical evaluation of the CareStart G6PD. It was a product, commercialized product, but it had this characteristic of a lateral flow test. As you can see, there's a big subjectivity in interpretation, and that made the sensitivity of the test very low. That is why we did not continue the field implementation of this test. Finishing my master's program with the validation of CareStart, I started with Dr. Barbara Baro and Dr. Catherine de Roost, my doctorate. It was an adventure in pathogenesis, different than what I did in the rest of my career. We did analysis of bone marrow in individuals infected by malaria in two moments, during active infection and then during convalescence, showing that these individuals have sequestration of parasite forms in the bone marrow, especially in prophyllocytes and the portion of gametocytes in the bone marrow. In addition to this, the study showed, as I said, a parasitemia similar to the peripheral blood. We compared these two tissues. It showed enriching of gametocytes and the presence of several stages of parasites in the bone marrow of these patients with malaria, and also high degree of transcripts of BS25. We went a little bit deeper in the bone marrow study, and we did the transcriptomics of the erythroblastic cells, the immature erythrocytic cells. We evolved until the reticulocytes, and we saw that there was a delay in the erythropoiesis of these individuals with malarium vivax, and erythropoiesis which is insufficient, which is then recovered in convalescence. So in the absence of malaria, there wasn't this erythropoiesis anymore. It is recovered by the immune system. And we also saw the high expression of transcripts by RT-PCR of genes involved in the immune response, in the complement, in the cellular survival, and a decrease in the genes, transcripts of genes related to maturing of erythrocytes. It could be related to erythropoiesis and the development of anemia in individuals with malaria feedbacks. This is the erythropoiesis, some interesting transcripts related to erythropoiesis underexpressed during the malaria infection that is recovered during convalescence. Here we explored a little bit the overlapping of our findings in known metabolic pathways like the FOX pathway that is related to the development of erythrocytes and cell survival, and also pathways of coagulation that were also altered. This work was done partially in the Institute 3 Pujol in Barcelona. That's the very important experience for the knowledge of this research. Then when I was finishing doctorate, I did the clinical validation of the biosensor G6PD test that is incorporated by the Universal Healthcare System of Brazil. It's the first test of G6PD deficiency implemented in Brazil. That was the first study where I had more independence and autonomy in project management, economic project management, input management, training, and analysis of the validation of the rapid test. In 2020, in the saddest period of our generation, we we were at the Delfina Aziz Hospital. It is a reference hospital for the treatment of COVID-19, and we did 3 clinical essays to assess the efficacy of chloroquine in severe forms, non-severe forms, and in corticosteroids in the elimination of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. This is the research team, part of the research team that participated, led by Professor Marcos Lacerda. And that was a very resilient group because we suffered a very deep retaliation of the public opinion of people who actually, this is a clear example of um, when science does not respond to the political wishes, it can be persecuted.
Depois disso, a gente iniciou o trust,
And then we started the trust, the study, the Fenoquin rollout study. It was the study to implement the Fenoquin. It started in 2020. We had a study of implementation of tafenoquine in Manaus and Porto Velho. This was the first individual in Manaus that used tafenoquine, and that was a study that brought a lot of learning to me because of this greater autonomy in being able to carry out research. We implemented in 49 health facilities in Manaus and Porto Velho, and Delio was a very important colleague in my biography as well. And here we did trainings for the personnel, development of educational material, in addition to the implementation of the test of tafenoquine in single dose. The main result related to tafenoquine was this high acceptability and also the high compliance of the treatment algorithm with tafenoquine used by the health system of Manaus. We also advanced in pharmacosurveillance and safety of treatment, led by Professor Wanderson and Antonio Baeiro and Patricia Baeiro. They designed the script of probabilistic linkage of CIVEP with the hospitalization systems and the mortality systems of the country, in which we have safety data of the use of tafenoquine in real-life scenarios. With this safety data, we managed to do a case study, more specific case study of these patients that developed hemolysis after the use of primaquine. These are the clinical criteria we used. QualiTrust is a brother of the trust study led by Felipe Morto. I am participating more as a learner than an effective participant, but it's important in my biography because it helped me learn a lot about the acceptability of implementation tools and the public healthcare system. This is some of the work that the team, Felipe's team, does in the field. Effect was a continuity of trust. After trust, we saw that tafenoquine up to 180 days has a similar effectiveness to primaquine, but when we see the curve, for example, in D60 and D90, we see a better effectiveness of tafenoquine in comparison to primaquine, and also the relapses that could be earlier. So tafenoquine delays these relapses, and we developed also an educational material for people with deficiency of G6PD that use weekly tafenoquine. Effect also brought as information the discovery of some variants that we did not have in our panel that are related to hemolysis by primaquine and tafenoquine. And we have advanced a lot in this area of research in polymorphisms and G6PD deficiency. I also worked in the development of ultrasensitive tests for malaria vivax and falciparum with path diagnostics. Trust 2 is an implementation study, expanded study of tafenoquine led by CIEMA, the Coordination of Elimination of Malaria, and we have tried to give technical and scientific support to the training of personnel and healthcare agents in all of Amazon. OneFoot was presented by Michelle earlier. It is a new option for diagnostics of G6PD deficiency, and it could be available in the universal healthcare system in the future. This is still a prototype, though. Some important works, the operational feasibility study of tafenoquine in real-life scenarios, published in Lancet Global Health. The work that originated my doctorate related to transcriptional and morphological changes in the human bone marrow of patients infected, and this enriching of gametocytes, and also the clinical validation of the diagnostics test of G6PD. A quick pipeline of what we intend to do for the future. We are following the implementation of pediatric tafenoquine started in March. We'll do an operational acceptability, effectiveness, tolerability, and safety study. We have advanced a lot in the G6PD gene deep sequencing, not only in Brazil, but we also intend to do that in other countries of the Latin America and develop new technologies for malaria aligned with the agenda of elimination of the national program of malaria. Finally, my acknowledgments. I can't speak about my scientific career without talking about Marcos Lacerda, who is my mentor, my professor, always challenged me and trusted my work. Dr. Anya Almeida, with whom I share daily our challenges and frustrations and also our my bad ideas. Usually other people also only have access to the good ideas.
I'd like to thank my colleague Felipe Murta. I've been working with him in a symbiotic way with qualitative and quantitative studies, and Dr. Elton Monteiro and Dr. Gisele that have been supporting me during the years. I'd like to extend my acknowledgments to all institutions that somehow um, helped me and I could participate and learn from them doing scientific research. And I thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.
Obrigada, Marcelo.
Thank you, Marcelo.
E
Congratulations
aí vamos
for
agora
your
proceder com
trajectory. And now we are going to have the
o Dr.
second
Pablo
candidate,
Secato Fontoura,
Dr. Pablo
atualmente na
Secato
função técnica
Fontoura.
na coordenação de
He is the
eliminação de
technical
malária no
assistant and
Ministério
the
da Saúde.
coordination for malaria elimination in the Ministry of Health.
O melhor são as torcidas, né?
The best part is seeing the rooters.
Boa noite, né, a todos.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this event. I'd like to congratulate my colleague Marcelo and also Rodrigo. They are also uh, in this award session. And I'm going to talk about my trajectory to you. And I separated that into topics. I'm going to talk about my academic training and another stage where I am a technical assistant in the Ministry of Health that is connected to the first step. I'm from this big city of 5,000 inhabitants, América de Campos, in the countryside of São Paulo. I'm a biomedic, graduated by the University of Londrina, and I also worked for the Secretariat of Health in São Paulo. My first contact with malaria was during my master's studies. I had the opportunity to study with this cohort with children in the state of Acre, and with Marcelo Urbano from USP. We were trying to understand the context, especially focusing on asymptomatic individuals. I had the opportunity to know the Amazon working in this agricultural area, and I was able to work with field work and statistics and A very important part of in the beginning of my journey, and this work is very important, showing the reservoirs. And in a natural way, I fell in love with the disease context. I don't like the disease, but I like the context where it's inserted. So we had the opportunity to work in with this project in my doctoral studies. We received this funding from FAPESP and Ministry of Health. It was a project connected to to services and academia. So we tested this active detection strategy for the elimination of malaria. We had this panel study. We followed the individuals in 4 moments. It was a study that was showing the reservoirs with a lot of importance, showing the importance of the segments in the individuals in this context. And we also shown the epidemiological links of transmission. A little bit of my journey. I've lived in this municipality of Verlândia for 1 year, a formidable experience. When I'm on vacations, I go there to visit them. And in my postdoctorate studies by UCB, I spent 1 year in Harvard and also the tropical studies in Lisbon. And I was thinking about working about the reservoir, but also how the environment with these anthropic actions could influence in this malaria transmission dynamic. So we were working in this endemic area of malaria. We tested this alternative and complementary strategy with larvicides in the area. We showed the efficacy of this product, diminishing the mature forms of vectors and also the number of cases. And it was a very important part of my training and a little bit of my journey. I've lived for 2.5 years in Cruzeiro do Sul in the state of Acre. This is the team that we worked with on the field. And within this study, I was still working with the human malaria investigation. Well, this is the summary of my academic training and the postdoctorate studies. I've worked with this transmission dynamic. I with this anthropic modification in the environment, and I had the privilege to live to experience these issues. Despite all of that, when we show the importance of the reservoir and all the issues in the state of Acre, has diminished in 30,000 cases in a period of 8 years. It's a very meaningful number. Mansulima municipality inserted in this context in 2017 when we started had the greatest IPA in the country and now it's very close to elimination, only 300 cases. So something is happening and I wanted to understand a little bit more. I had this desire to know the service, to work with the service and try to apply my knowledge especially to with this definition of residual malaria concerning what we did in this control context, what we need to eliminate malaria in the inside. This is me with more doubts than definition. And in the second stage, I had the opportunity in 2021 to start as a technical assistant in the Ministry of Health. So initially, I was going to spend 1 year and I would go back to academia, but now I'm 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 there in the ministry for 5 years. I'm a researcher and a collaborator in different projects as well. And based on these works, as many of you, I've designed this strategy, thinking about the different scenarios, thinking about the micro stratification, micro planning. Today, 25 municipalities in Brazil that detain 80% of the malaria, and almost 80% of them don't have autochthonous uh, transmission. So we should understand the place with different strategies. I designed the proposal according to municipalities, and the scenarios are directing the active strategies. Of course, the passive one is routine. And also, coming from this proposal, we have the segmentation, which is very important, and this guiding panel. And after identifying the scenario, which actions should I take? So we've worked with that and based on your work as well. So one of my questioning is if we put the houses on paper and put all the colors, would people understand that on the field? Not in my opinion. So I've been working constantly. You can, if you want to hide from me, go to Brasilia because I stay much more on the field discussing these issues. So how to develop these strategies in a rural area, in a peri-urban area, how to adapt this kind of model for this mining area, for instance, where the state should go. Because if the state is not going there, we are going to open up for bad things, such as malaria resistance and so on. We must design strategies to reach these people. And a last experience that was huge for me was taking this proposal with the local agents, with the state, to this area of isolated indigenous persons who do not speak the language in a very different context. So I stayed there for 10 days to understand their context, to rediscuss the context. So that was the idea, to take science, take the proposals, and use this local strategy. Who is designing that? It must be the local agent. The surveillance should be in the hands of the local agents. And another issue that I've been working with that has been helping in the ministry, this possibility of this complementary strategy for vector control that should be discussed where cost effectiveness, but uh, um, it was efficient, and we developed this protocol for entomology. What is the rationale here? We should think about the future of entomology. It's today we have a different context. We don't have a lot of people on the field, so this could be a possibility. Having this optimized entomology, more punctual, that has reliable results. It's not something simple, but it could be a protocol and a partnership between academia with this renovation, and also empowering the labs that that support us, and also with local demand. So it's a possible use for the etymology. So this is part of my work. We've been participating in local trainings for implementing the innovations such as tafenoquine and other drugs. And in my opinion, in the opinion of the ministry, we shouldn't use only tafenoquine. We have other alternatives of treatment for primaquine in different contexts. So we must use the innovation that we have, and we must discuss that at every level. So these are some of the actions here showing that I went to indigenous areas to have this kind of conversation. This is a little bit of what I've been doing. And this is a part that I believe that without education and health promotion, there's no sustainable plan. This is the basis of our construction. In 2013, we have written this project. We were able to get this course for eliminating malaria. We had more than 6 courses, more than 500 people trained. We have multidisciplinary professionals being trained. We talk about management and policies. This is super important in this process. So it's a multidisciplinary course. The last one happened recently with the priorities with different municipalities for us to discuss elimination in a tripartite way. And here is something that I'm the technical responsible, which is the scientific dialogue on malaria. We honored Professor Pedro Tayu, who is here. So we received a question, Pablo, why are we using vaccines in Africa and not in Brazil? We have this protocol response, a technical one, and we keep using it. But why don't we talk about that with that professional on the field? So that was the idea. We developed the dialogues with different topics. I'm going to give you an example about the vaccine because it's a challenge to bring this knowledge to the field. But Professor Irene, who accepted the challenge, she had to adapt her speech and the slides to talk about this topic in a horizontal way, and it was great because people saying were saying that they have been working for 30 years with malaria and they didn't know how the vaccine was developed. So it's the sixth seminar. It started last year, and we also have the elimination workshops. I've been working with my colleagues in the state, and we discuss the topics. Do people know the difference between control and elimination? We talk about turning the key, but the municipalities, do they know about the differences? What are the definitions? The asymptomatic for the researcher is the same as those on the field. We are discussing these issues that are important for this context. Some of the projects I participate in, the recent projects as a researcher, these two approach the environment, malaria and climate change, and the second is concerning the vector, and and this one is ongoing with this issue of mobility. I'm the responsible researcher um, for this the development of indicators, not only concerning risk, but also number of cases, inputs, and environmental risks, understanding that the malaria is directly related to vulnerability is of people in Brazil. And the third one, which is a topic of diagnosis in the area of elimination, and I've been working with Professor Maria de Fatima and people from IOC, and it's a critical topic for us to advance in this context. Some of the actions, I'm speaking fast because I'm concerned about the time. And some of the initiatives that I've been working with in different contexts, I'll do everything with my team, and I like highlight those with which I am the technical responsible. I've been discussing with CTA and many of you, supporting you in whatever is possible and viable at that point. And I highlight that I'm ahead of the the molecular surveillance network when we count on you so that we can have this horizontal discussion between research ministry and this topic that is very important. And these are the points I highlight. Here, it's the final part. My time is almost up. Some configurations. This Laverin was a watershed in my career. So I came from Acre, I went there, and Andrea and Paula from the ministry put me in my own place. But jokes aside, I was growing a lot. I participated in different events, and I value that the presence in the community with the agents that is helping me to understand the context and the different houses, how I could change the colors, and I'm valuing more and more not to the detriment of others, but this context of talking to local agents and local population. To finalize, that's what I'm working with in this short career, in the science of control and elimination and prevention. And we have our specificities, but we must harness what we have. It's a context that we have to think about different scenarios concerning Brazil. Science was, is, and will always be present because without science, we are not able to create protocols, we are not able to get to the plans. So this is the basis. And when we justify anything, why we should eliminate malaria, we use science to justify that. Malaria should be a state program, regardless of what we expect. So here, I have many people to thank. That wouldn't fit on the slide. Um, uh, my friends in GC, they made this picture to me, and thank you so much to all of you.
Obrigada, Pablo. Parabéns pela
Thank you,
trajetória.
Pablo. Congratulations on the trajectory.
Convido agora ao palco
I'd
o
like to invite to the stage Dr. Rodrigo Malavasi Corda,
candidato,
the next candidate
professor no Departamento
that
de
is nowadays the
Biotecnologia,
professor in the
Biomédicas da Universidade de São Paulo.
parasitology department in the biomedic department of the University of São Paulo. Rodrigo, Hello, good
Queria
evening, everyone. I would like to recognize Carol's and Daniel's work for this Congress. I'd like to thank the scientific community for the opportunity to present my work here. I'd like to greet Pablo and uh, and Professor Jamili and Danielle, uh, and I hope to keep the level of the presentations that are very impressive. I'm Rodrigo.
Sou Rodrigo, então sou professor no
I'm
departamento de
a professor
parasitologia.
in the parasitology
Primeiramente, gostaria de
department
falar
at UCB. First of all, I'd
da
like to
professora
talk about
Nussenzweig.
Professor Ruth
Ela foi
Nussenzweig,
em 53,
and she was
em
graduated in
53,
medicine in
ela
53. In 58, she returned to Brazil to obtain
tirou o
her
doutorado pela Espanha.
diploma,
Como já foi dito
her
pelo
doctoral
professor
diploma,
Aloysio, pela
as
Irene e
Professor
Irene,
Aloysio and Irene said,
políticas
and
sanitárias
due to the adverse conditions at the time, she returned to
um tempo no exterior, em
sh
1960,
she returned abroad, and in
por exemplo,
68 she was awarded
em
with her
67 ela
doctoral
publicou na
uh,
Nature, em
degree. In
67
67 she
outras
published
tantas
in Nature. Maybe it's
pós-graduação,
an inspiration for
foram
the
feitas em
postdoc
longo trabalho que deu
professor, and she published
início
in
aos
Nature the
desenvolvimentos
work
da
that started with the
da vacina
development
que
of
hoje
the vaccine
é
that
recomendada
today is
pela
recommended by
Organização Mundial da Saúde, nas palavras do
WHO.
Organon,
In the words
é
of
muito histórico.
Terabus
Em meus primeiros
Arganon,
anos no
this
CEP,
is a historic
então essa
moment. I'd
minha
like to honor
trajetória em
her.
malária começou em 2017, no meu
My
doutorado,
trajectory in malaria started in 2017 in my doctorate, advised by Dr. Marcelo Ferreira in the University of São Paulo. I have been uh, in another country in the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. In 2021, I finished my postdoc.
acredito, e talvez seja unanimidade nessa plateia,
Maybe it's an unanimity in this audience, but it wasn't a favorable moment for education in Brazil. It wasn't a favorable political moment. So with the opportunity that I had, I left the country and I did my postdoc in the University of California, Berkeley.
continuei estudando
I
malária,
continued
mas
studying malaria, but from another aspect, I studied gene drag systems. I returned to Brazil in 2023 to take a position as a visiting researcher in the University of São Paulo. In 2025,
me desloquei para o Imperial College, estou fazendo
I went to the Imperial College for a research internship, and throughout this whole trajectory, malaria was my main research theme.
apresentar pouquinho das ideias que a gente desenvolveu durante esse período.
And I'm going to present some of the ideas that we developed during this period.
Estado do Acre foi então
Mansulima is located in the state of Acre. That was where I obtained my data
os estudos que
for the studies
durante
that I published
esse período.
throughout this period. Mansulima is a municipality located in Acre with around 17,000 inhabitants. 50% of the people live in the rural area. In 2014, it had the highest parasite index in Brazil. We started with a census organized by the group of Professor Marcelo that counted almost 9,000 people distributed in 2,300 residences. We obtained demographic and socioeconomic data on these individuals, and we combined this with the data of malaria from CVEP.
Os trabalhos que eu vou apresentar daqui para frente foram baseados
The works that I'm going to present from here on were based on this database.
cidade de Mansulima.
This is the city of Mansulima. I took this photo. We were arriving in Acre. We flew over the town, and I could acknowledge it from above.
Aqui onde foram realizados
This
os
is
estudos. A
where
gente começou
we did all the studies.
com a gente teve acesso a 1.000 dias de
We had access to 1,000 days of data from CVEP, and the first thing we did was
dois bancos de dados,
cross
dados do
this
censo dessa cidade
database with the census of the city, and we created a distribution of the number of cases per person. We saw that the transmission of malaria in this location was very heterogeneous. Most of the people, almost 70% of them, did not have malaria in 1,000 days, while some of them had many infections, many episodes of malaria throughout these 1,000 days. So this heterogeneity became a theme for the next few chapters of this trajectory. I highlight here one point that we identified a risk factor that was more associated to malaria during this period in this city, which was people living on the edges of the city. It it is not trivial to define what is the edge of the city. We used alpha shapes. We created an algorithm, and we saw that those who lived in that location had a heightened risk of malaria. This dialogues with the plan to eliminate malaria that says that the peripheries of the cities, especially in Amazon cities, are a high risk area for malaria transmission. In our second paper, bearing in mind the heterogeneity of transmission, we created a model that I would say became a theoretical reference for how we think about the dynamics of malaria transmission. And if I can have your attention, I would ask the attention to this slide that might be the most important one in the presentation. We defined an individual that is susceptible to malaria, who is infected, and then after the treatment they recover, and this individual probably gets some immunity because they were exposed to a parasite, and then they infect again, and they recover again, and whenever they get infected, they have more immunity and have less probability of developing symptoms. And if they are exposed to the parasite, we created the premise that the more this individual was exposed to parasites, the lower were the probabilities of becoming uh, infected and asymptomatic. So we tried to adjust the model regarding density of incidence and distribution of the number of cases per person. This model is very simple. It has very few parameters. The idea is this one, but we saw that if we considered that everybody had the same exposure to malaria, we wouldn't be able to adjust the data very well. So we divided the population into two groups, a group of high risk and a group of low risk. Both within this dynamics, but the high risk group would have more probability to be infected, to be recovered, and to change positions, and the low risk group would have a more conservative dynamics. When we adjusted the data of the model to the data observed in the fields, we saw that 80% of the population was low risk, while 20% was high risk. And whenever an individual was infected, we had a constant rate of gain of partial immunity with this exponential reduction. So if we divide these individuals in low risk and high risk groups, the low risk individuals are infected, are susceptible, infected, and asymptomatic infected. They get infected, they recover in a slower rate. The high risk individuals, they get infected and recovered much faster. So there is an accumulation of asymptomatic individuals according to the progression of age. You know that the older the age, the easier it is to get to find an asymptomatic infection in the field. So this is the dynamics that we think about or bear in mind when we do the next analysis. This is also in dialogue with the National Plan of Elimination of Malaria that says that the stratification of risk should be done in the micro and in the macro scale. Here we're thinking about stratification of risk in a city. So we look at the dynamics of transmission of malaria through these lenses. and I will talk about this in different moments of my presentation. Knowing that the prevalence of malaria, Vivax malaria, is the most prevalent is the highest in the region. So we also studied relapses in this population using data of pregnant women and non-pregnant women. We compare them and we created an extremely simple model to do that. It's extremely simple. The equation may be scary, but it is simply a proportion of people that is susceptible to relapses or not, and the other only susceptible to new infections. And we adopted a constant rate, a constant rate for relapses.
Deixa eu correr aqui.
Oh, let me rush. My time is almost over.
Até me perdi aqui. Tá, a gente viu então, a partir desse modelo, a gente
And
conseguiu
using this model, we were able to simulate a prophylaxis of malaria,
aqui uma profilaxia
and we
para
saw that
depois do primeiro caso
there could be a prophylaxis of malaria in pregnant women, specifically to reduce the occurrence
20% após
among these people between 20 and 65% after the first infection. That dialogues with the guideline of treatment of malaria that predicts that pregnant women must have prophylaxis after the first case of malaria. And that was only possible through this lens. As I said,
mas como que eu
transmission is heterogeneous, so
uma taxa de novas infecções constante.
we need to use a constant new infection rate. It seems contradictory, but with this lens, we excluded high-risk people. We used the previous number of cases and we excluded all high-risk people, so we can consider this dynamics.
Depois disso, a gente coletou diversos
After that, we collected several studies done in the Amazon
dados de QPCR, então
with QPCR data, and we quantified the distribution of the parasitemias in these individuals, and we saw that the parasitemia in asymptomatic individuals was lower than in symptomatic individuals. We obtained data on mosquitoes and how much they were infected.
parasitemia, qual a probabilidade de infectar
What was the probability of infecting the mosquito? So we combined this information and we were able to estimate the relative contribution of different strata of the population. Here I'm showing individuals with a higher parasitemia.
seriam aqueles, por exemplo, nessa localidade de Acrelândia, contribuiriam com 80%
In this location of Agrilandia, for example, they will contribute to 86% of the local contamination, and a parasitemia of less than 100 parasites per microliter will contribute only 13%.
dos métodos tradicionais de diagnóstico, como a
So we use microliters because this is the official measurement that is used for diagnostics.
tudo isso num artigo
We gathered all of this in a review article and we discussed if individuals that would have several cases would simply be unlucky.
a gente juntou essas informações lá.
So we gathered this information in this paper. With Pablo,
A gente viu que com o
we saw that with the decrease in transmission,
o limiar de detecção
the detection threshold
aumentava
of the infections increased throughout time,
no Deracre, que é distrito de
both in Deracre, a district of Cruzeiro do Sul, and in Manso Lima. That could bring problems when we think about uh, the elimination of malaria. So, with Carlos,
essa coorte de Manso Lima, a gente então
this
selecionou
with Carlos, we selected here from this cohort of Amancio Lima 1,700 individuals. We genotyped all the individuals and we analyzed the polymorphisms of the Duffy blood group.
somente a
And when we look only at the occurrence among these guys, we can't find significant difference with the exception of the negative Duffy group that has a lower occurrence rate. But when we look through the lens of heterogeneity, as we have been doing, we stratified this by age and we saw that one of the polymorphisms indicated higher risk. But if it indicates higher risk in a certain moment, it gains partial immunity and then they have lower risk. So
A
this
gente também
equalizes
analisou
throughout time. We also
no
analyzed
dia 16 com a
the
Thaís, com a Carol,
enzyme
bom, eu vou ter que passar rápido. A gente viu que
CYP2D6.
indivíduos com a atividade nula ou muito
We saw
baixa,
that individuals with zero or low activity of
recaídas,
CP2D6
analisou
have
dados
a
também do
lower rate
sistema,
of relapses. We analyzed data from the system and we saw that.
meu tempo acabou, eu não,
Well, my time is over. I'm not sure if I can continue, but
correlacionou mobilidade com fluxo
we correlated
gene,
mobility with
pô,
gene flow.
vou falar mais esse, depois eu paro.
I will talk about this one and then I will stop.
Talvez
This is the
mais
poster that I'm presenting that may be relevant for control.
relacionou a dinâmica de
We correlated the dynamics of malaria with the political continuity in the cities. We crossed the data of CVEP with the data of the Electoral Supreme Court,
e viu que as cidades que têm reeleição do
and we saw that the cities
prefeito ou que
that have mayors re-elected or that have a continuity in the political candidates have a lower occurrence in the next 4 years
onde uma nova
than
liderança
those cities where a new leader is elected.
eleita
When we have a new leader elected,
20%
they
a mais
experience
malária,
20% more malaria in the next 4 years,
mostra que
which shows
talvez
that
uma institucionalização
maybe an institutionalization of the
malária
malaria control system would be extremely relevant for
a gente atingir
us to reach
eliminação.
elimination.
Drive também.
I work with Gene Drive
Bom,
too.
é isso.
I'd just like to mention this
Esse tempo
specifically
eu
throughout this time.
minha formação é
I
engenharia elétrica.
I have a degree in electrical engineering, so I arrived at the doctorate without
Nada, mas talvez
knowing
um pouquinho do
anything about malaria. Today I know a little bit more than nothing, but everything that I learned about malaria practically was with Professor Marcelo. Professor Marcelo was my great mentor throughout this trajectory. I had other collaborations.
tá. Diversas revisões, o meu laboratório, se alguém quiser trabalhar pensando em modelos matemáticos,
If
malária,
you want to work thinking of mathematical models, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to the laboratory, and I leave you with this amazing quote
Mário de Andrade,
by Mario de Andrade in the book Macunaíma, and we know that everyone here
por malária, a gente sabe que é
is
difícil,
fighting
mas a gente vem
to eliminate malaria, and maybe we are going to see this at some point. Thank you.
Obrigada, Rodrigo. Parabéns pela
Thank you,
trajetória.
Rodrigo. Congratulations for your trajectory. Congratulations to the three candidates. I'm not sure if anyone else would like to talk. I think in this session we don't have questions. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here watching our last candidates presentations.